I was 16 years old when the sound of my stepfather's voice roared through the thin walls of our small Ohio home. The clock had barely struck 9 at night, but my heart was already pounding in my chest. Tom Carter stood in the living room, red in the face, waving the crumpled $20 bill I had earned from selling a sketch to a classmate. His hand trembled with rage, as if I had committed a crime instead of trying to save a little money for myself. "What is this?" he bellowed, his voice echoing into the neighborhood. "You think you can hide money from me? You live under my roof. You follow my rules." I stood frozen by the couch, clutching my worn backpack to my chest. Inside it, my sketchbook held every drawing I had made for the past 2 years. It was the only thing that gave me peace. My mother, Linda, stood near the kitchen doorway. Her hands shook as she twisted the edge of her sweater eyes darting between Tom and me, but her lips stayed sealed. "Please," I whispered, my throat dry. "It was just for art supplies. I just wanted to buy pencils." Tom's face hardened. He stepped closer, his boots striking the floor with a rhythm of intimidation. He raised his hand, and before I could flinch away, the sting of his palm burned across my cheek. The room spun. My ears rang. I could taste blood where I had bitten my tongue. "You're not my daughter!" he shouted, his spit flying with each word. "Pack your stuff and get out. You're nothing but a burden." At that moment, I thought my mother would step in. I thought she would say something, anything. Instead, she lowered her gaze to the floor as if I were a stranger who had wandered into her home. That silence cut deeper than the slap. A loud knock rattled the front window. Mr. Miller, the old man who lived next door, called through the glass. "Is everything all right in there?" Tom spun toward the window, his face blazing with fury. "Mind your business," he yelled, slamming the curtain shut. My heart leapt with a small flicker of hope. Maybe Mr. Miller would call the police. Maybe Child Protective Services would come this time. They had been to the house before after teachers noticed my bruises, but each time my mother had smiled politely and explained I was clumsy, that I tripped on the stairs or fell during gym class. CPS never stayed long. They believed her. They always believed her. "Go on," Tom barked, jerking his chin toward the door. "Out." The rain outside beat against the roof in a steady rhythm. I tightened my grip on my backpack, feeling the outline of my sketchbook through the fabric. My room upstairs was filled with small pieces of me, but I knew I would not be allowed to take any of it. Not the blanket my grandmother had sewn when I was a child, not the second-hand novels stacked by my bed, not even the jacket that actually kept out the cold. All I could carry was what I held in my arms, Linda. I pleaded, my voice breaking as I turned to my mother. "Please, say something. Please don't let him do this." She swallowed hard and whispered barely loud enough for me to hear. "You should just go, Emma. It will be easier." Those words crushed me more than Tom's slap. I stepped toward the door, my knees weak. The porch light flickered as I opened it, and the cold night air rushed in sharp and unforgiving. Behind me, Tom's voice thundered one last time. "Do not come back. You're not wanted here." The door slammed shut, and I was left standing in the rain with nothing but a backpack and the sketchbook that held my soul. The water soaked through my shoes in seconds. My hair clung to my cheeks. My face still burned from the strike. I looked up and down the street, empty except for the faint glow of Mr. Miller's window across the way. I thought maybe he would come outside. Maybe he would insist on helping me. But his lights went dim, and the neighborhood fell silent again. I walked one step after another, the rain mixing with tears, until I could not tell the difference. My body trembled with cold, but the deeper ache was inside me. I kept hearing Tom's words. "You're not my daughter. You're not wanted." Every child wants to believe there is someone who will fight for them, someone who will stand in the doorway and refuse to let them be cast out into the night. I had hoped it would be my mother. I had hoped maybe CPS would arrive, or a police cruiser would pull into the driveway with flashing lights. But no one came. By the time I reached the overpass at the edge of town, my backpack was soaked and my sketchbook's pages were damp and curling. I ducked under the concrete shelter and pressed my back against the cold wall. Cars roared above their headlights, flashing briefly, as if mocking how invisible I had become. I hugged my knees to my chest and whispered to myself, someone has to notice. Someone has to care. But deep down, I already knew the truth. No one was coming. I had truly been thrown away. When I was 10 years old, my mother Linda told me she had met someone new. His name was Tom Carter, and he was supposed to be the answer to all of our problems. Back then, it was just the two of us living in a small apartment above a laundromat in Dayton. Mom worked long shifts at the diner and came home exhausted, smelling of coffee and grease, her hair tied back with strands falling loose around her tired face. She said Tom was steady, reliable, and ready to give us both the stability we had never had. I wanted to believe her. At first, Tom seemed charming. He brought me small gifts, asked about school, and even took us out to dinner at a steakhouse. I remember feeling almost normal that night, laughing at a joke he told while Mom smiled like she had finally found happiness. But within months of moving into his house, the warmth faded and the cold reality set in. Tom's true nature revealed itself slowly like a shadow creeping across the floor. The first time he yelled at me, it was because I had left my sneakers by the front door. His voice was sharp and unforgiving, and I felt small under his glare. The second time, it was because I had spilled milk at breakfast. Then came the slaps, quick and hard, followed by the lectures that always ended with the same words, "You're lucky I let you stay here." At school, my teachers began to notice bruises on my arms and the way I flinched when someone raised their hand too quickly. One afternoon, my English teacher, Mrs. Thompson, pulled me aside after class. She asked if everything was all right at home. I tried to smile and say yes, but she was not convinced. A week later, a social worker from Child Protective Services came to the house. Her name was Ms. Reynolds. She sat with me in the living room while Tom paced the hallway and Mom hovered in the kitchen. Ms. Reynolds asked if I felt safe if anyone had hurt me, if I needed help. I wanted so badly to tell her the truth, to roll up my sleeves and show her the bruises, to tell her how Tom's anger left me shaking at night. But Mom jumped in before I could answer. She laughed lightly and told Ms. Reynolds I was clumsy, that I had fallen off my bike and tripped in gym class. Tom crossed his arms and gave me a look that said if I contradicted them, I would pay. My throat closed up and I said nothing. A week later, Ms. Reynolds closed the case. The file marked unsubstantiated. Life continued as if nothing had happened. That was when I realized the system could not save me. Mom seemed to sink deeper into Tom's orbit. She stopped speaking up for me and started echoing his criticisms. When I brought home a report card with mostly A's and one B, she scolded me for not being more like Mark, Tom's son from his first marriage. Mark lived in Chicago with his mother and visited during summers. Tom spoke of him constantly, praising his achievements, showing off his pictures, comparing every part of me to him. "Why can't you be more like Mark?" he would say, and Mom would nod as if it were a reasonable question. Slowly, I became invisible in my own home. Meals became tense gatherings where Tom sat at the head of the table dictating conversation, while Mom smiled nervously and I stared at my plate. I learned to eat quickly and quietly, hoping to avoid drawing attention. When I asked Mom if we could spend time together like we used to, she shook her head and said she was tired, that Tom needed her. It felt like she had chosen him over me every single day. At school, I found refuge in my sketchbook. I drew in the margins of my notebooks on scraps of paper anywhere I could. Drawing was the only time I felt in control, the only place where Tom's voice could not reach me. My best friend Anna noticed how often I carried that sketchbook around. One afternoon, she caught me in the library hiding behind a shelf, sketching a picture of a girl curled into herself with shadows looming above. Anna touched my shoulder and whispered, "Emma, this isn't normal. You should call someone. There's a hotline for kids in danger." She scribbled down the number for the National Domestic Violence Hotline on a sticky note and pressed it into my hand. I wanted to call. I wanted to believe that a phone number could change everything, but fear gripped me tighter than hope. If Tom found out, if CPS came again and left again, what would he do to me then? So I folded the sticky note into my sketchbook and never dialed. Years blurred into a routine of silence and fear. I became an outsider in my own family, tolerated but never embraced. Tom controlled the money. Mom depended on him completely, and I was the extra mouth to feed. Every night as I lay in bed, I whispered to myself that I would survive one more day, one more week, one more year until I was old enough to leave. But I was still only 16, and leaving on my own felt impossible. The house that was supposed to give me stability had instead become a cage. Dinner that night was supposed to be ordinary, but in my house, ordinary always carried a sense of dread, like waiting for the ground to split beneath your feet. The kitchen smelled faintly of burnt meatloaf as Mom set plates down, her hands trembling slightly while Tom sat at the head of the table, his posture stiff, his eyes sharp. I slid into my usual seat at the far end, my sketchbook hidden under the chair cushion where I thought he would not notice. The clink of silverware was the only sound until Tom began talking about Mark, his son, from his first marriage. Mark had just received a scholarship to a well-known college in Chicago. Tom's chest swelled with pride as he described the letter of acceptance, the professors who had already taken interest in Mark, the bright future waiting for him. Mom leaned forward, nodding eagerly, her eyes shining as if Mark were her own blood. "He is such a good boy," she said softly. "A real success." Then Tom's gaze shifted to me, and I knew what was coming. "Why can't you be like Mark?" he demanded, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "Mark is driven. Mark is respectful. Mark doesn't waste time scribbling in notebooks like some moody little girl." I wanted to vanish. My stomach knotted, my cheeks burned. Mom looked at me not with sympathy, but with something like disappointment. "He is right, Emma," she said quietly. "You need to think about your future. Art won't put food on the table." Her words hit harder than Tom's because she was supposed to be the one who believed in me. I stared at my plate, pushing peas around with the edge of my fork, willing the moment to pass. Inside my head, one thought screamed louder than anything else: I am invisible. The meal dragged on Tom's voice, filling the room with story after story of Mark's achievements, each one a reminder of my supposed failures. By the time dinner ended, my appetite was gone. I retreated to my room, pulled the sketchbook from under my chair, and opened to a fresh page. My pencil moved quickly, almost violently, sketching a girl fading into the background while everyone else laughed and cheered around her. That drawing felt like the truest reflection of my life. The next day at school, I sat with Anna in the library. She watched me sketch quietly before she leaned closer and whispered, "You do not deserve this, Emma. You need to call for help. There are people who will listen." She pulled the same sticky note with the hotline number from her backpack, a duplicate she had written just in case I had lost the first. I shook my head, fear tightening my throat. "If CPS comes again and nothing changes, he will make me pay." Anna frowned, her eyes filled with frustration and worry. "But you cannot keep living like this. One day he is going to go too far." I wanted to believe her, but fear is heavy, and at 16 I felt too small to lift it. That evening, back at home, Tom rummaged through my backpack and found a folded sketch I had planned to give Anna. He sneered at the picture, a dark image of a girl with bruises hidden under her sleeves. "What is this supposed to be?" he barked. "Are you trying to make me look bad drawing this trash?" He ripped the page in half and threw it at my feet. "If I see anything like this again, you will regret it." My mother stood in the doorway, silent as always, her face pale. I picked up the torn pieces when they left the room and tucked them back into my sketchbook like broken bones I could not throw away. That night, lying in bed, I whispered the words that had become my mantra: survive one more day. Yet deep inside, the belief that I mattered was slipping further away. The betrayal was not just Tom's fists or his cruel words, it was my mother's silence, her willingness to erase me piece by piece until there was nothing left but shadows. The weeks after that dinner blurred together into a pattern of fear and silence. Each day, another test of how long I could hold myself together without cracking. Tom's control grew heavier with every breath I took. When I sold another sketch to a classmate for a few dollars, thinking I could save quietly for pencils or maybe a second-hand coat for winter, Tom found the money and snatched it out of my hand before I could even explain. His eyes narrowed with a cold fury. "You don't get to keep secrets from me," he hissed. "Everything in this house is mine, including you." He pocketed the bills and slammed the door behind him. My stomach churned. It was not just about money. It was about ownership, about reminding me that nothing belonged to me, not even the skin on my bones. A few days later at school, my counselor, Ms. Diaz, called me into her office. She had kind eyes and a soft voice that always seemed to reach past my walls. She asked how I was doing, if I felt safe at home. Her gaze lingered on the fading bruise along my jaw that no amount of concealer could hide. For a moment, I wanted to tell her everything, to spill the truth onto her desk like shattered glass. But the image of Tom's glare filled my mind, the way he had warned me that if CPS ever came again, I would regret it. Fear glued my tongue in place. I forced a smile and said I was fine, just clumsy. Ms. Diaz's eyes told me she did not believe me, but without my words, there was little she could do. That evening, Tom's mood was darker than usual. He paced the living room, muttering under his breath about work and bills. When he caught me sketching quietly at the table, he snatched the pencil from my hand and snapped it in half. "No more of this nonsense," he barked. "You need to focus on real life, not stupid drawings." Mom hovered nearby, wringing her hands. Later that night, she slipped into my room and whispered, "Please don't report him, Emma. If CPS takes him away, I will lose everything. We can't survive without him." Her voice was pleading, desperate, as if I were the threat, not the man who bruised me. "He will calm down if you stop provoking him. Please just endure it." Her words felt like chains around my chest. I wanted to scream that I was her daughter, that I was the one who needed protection, but the fear in her eyes told me she had already chosen her side. From then on, I began keeping a secret record. In the back pages of my sketchbook, I drew what happened to me. The shapes of hands raised in anger, the outline of my body curled on the floor, the dark shades of bruises that told stories I could not speak aloud. Each drawing was a piece of evidence hidden in plain sight, my form of resistance when words failed me. One Saturday afternoon, Tom returned home earlier than expected and caught me sitting with Anna on the front steps. She had brought me a set of colored pencils she had saved for weeks to buy. Tom's eyes narrowed as he saw the gift. He yanked it out of my hands and threw it onto the lawn. "Get inside," he growled. I obeyed, my heart racing. That night he stormed into my room and warned, "If I ever see CPS on this doorstep again, you will wish you had never been born." His breath smelled of whiskey. His fists clenched tight. I curled into myself, clutching my sketchbook under the blanket, knowing it was the only shield I had. At school, Anna continued to press me. "You need to tell someone," she urged. "You can't keep living like this." I shook my head, the fear choking me. "He will find out. And then what?" She looked at me with tears in her eyes, but I could not move past the terror that paralyzed me. The crisis kept climbing, each moment heavier than the last, each night more suffocating. I counted down the days until I could legally leave, but 16 felt like an eternity away from freedom. With every passing hour, the walls of that house closed in tighter, and I knew something would eventually break. It happened on a night that began like so many others, with tension already simmering before the sun even set. I had sold a small sketch at school for $20, and I thought I had hidden the bill carefully between the pages of my math book. But Tom had a way of sniffing out anything that belonged to me, as if my tiny scraps of independence were insults carved against his authority. He stormed into my room just after dinner, his heavy boots pounding the floor like a warning drum. In his hand, he held the $20 bill, now crumpled and damp from his sweat. "What is this?" he demanded, his face inches from mine. "You think you can sneak around me? Keep money for yourself. Lie to me in my own house." My throat closed as I tried to explain. I wanted to buy pencils, that's all. Just pencils for my art. But my words only fueled his rage. He struck me across the face so hard that the room seemed to tilt sideways. Pain exploded in my jaw, and the taste of copper filled my mouth. I stumbled back against the dresser, clutching my backpack as if it could shield me. "You ungrateful brat," he roared. "I feed you, I put a roof over your head, and this is how you repay me." My mother appeared in the doorway, her hands trembling as she clutched the frame. "Tom, please," she whispered. "She's just a child." But when his glare cut toward her, she fell silent. The silence stretched like a blade slicing through me more than his slap. With a guttural sound of disgust, Tom grabbed my backpack, ripped it from my arms, and hurled it across the room. My sketchbook spilled out the pages, fanning open to reveal the secret drawings I had kept. His eyes fell on the images of bruises, fists, and a small figure cowering in a dark room, his face twisted with fury. "So this is what you do," he shouted, "trying to make me look like a monster drawing lies about me." He stomped on the sketchbook, grinding the pages under his boot until the paper tore. I lunged forward, desperate to save it, but his shove sent me sprawling across the floor. "Get out," he spat. "Pack whatever you can carry and get out of my house. Tonight." I looked to my mother, my eyes begging, my voice breaking. "Mom, please." "Don't let him do this. I have nowhere to go." Her lips trembled. For a moment, I thought she would defy him, would step between us, would choose me. But her words came out thin and lifeless. "You better go, Emma. Don't make it worse." My heart shattered. I gathered my torn sketchbook and shoved it back into my backpack, the fabric damp from tears. Tom stormed to the closet, yanked out my clothes, and threw them onto the floor. He kicked the pile toward me. "Take it and leave." The rain outside hammered against the windows, the sound merging with the roar in my ears. My hands shook as I stuffed a few things into the bag. My vision blurred with tears, and every muscle screamed to collapse, but I forced myself to move. If I did not, he would drag me out by force. Within minutes, I was standing at the front door, my backpack slung over one shoulder, the weight of my ruined sketchbook pulling me down. The porch light flickered as Tom swung the door open and shoved me out into the storm. "Do not come back," he growled. "You're no daughter of mine. You are nothing." The door slammed behind me with a finality that echoed through my bones. I stood there in the rain, trembling, the cold soaking through my clothes, my shoes filling with water. I turned to my mother's silhouette in the window, hoping she would wave me back in, open the door, anything. But the curtain fell and her figure disappeared. I stumbled down the street, the storm beating me from every side. My phone had no charge, no money for a bus ticket, no safe place to go. Out of desperation, I dialed Anna from a payphone outside a gas station, my fingers slipping on the wet metal. She answered with relief in her voice until I explained what had happened. She begged me to come to her house, but she was out of town with her family. All she could offer was a promise. "I will keep your sketchbook safe if you want to leave it with me. Use it as evidence one day, but right now, just survive." I swallowed back tears and told her I would. I wandered through the night until my legs gave out beneath the overpass at the edge of town. The smell of damp concrete and gasoline clung to the air. A group of older homeless men huddled near a small fire built in a rusted barrel, their faces lined with hardship. They glanced at me but said nothing, their silence both terrifying and oddly comforting. I curled against the wall, hugging my backpack to my chest, pressing the torn sketchbook against my heart, as if it were the last piece of myself I could protect. My body shook violently with cold, my teeth chattering. I whispered into the darkness, "The system failed me. Everyone failed me." And for the first time, I believed that maybe I really was invisible. The rain had not stopped by the time the night bled into early morning, and I sat curled beneath the bridge, shivering so violently that I could barely keep my arms around my backpack. The roar of cars above was constant, each passing headlight flashing briefly through the cracks like reminders of a world that no longer had a place for me. My sketchbook, its pages warped and smudged, rested against my chest. I whispered to it like it was a living thing, the only witness to everything I had endured. Around me, the small group of homeless souls stirred. A man named Joe, who looked like he had been broken by decades of hard labor and harder liquor, tossed me half of a granola bar. "Keep your strength up, kid," he muttered, his eyes soft despite his rough edges. I nodded silently, taking the tiny bite as if it were a feast. A woman named Maria pulled a threadbare blanket tighter around her shoulders and shook her head. "You're too young to be here," she said. "Someone should be looking out for you." Her words stung because they named the truth I had been trying to ignore. My body felt heavy, my heart heavier, and for a moment, I thought I might just close my eyes and let the world forget me. That was when I saw the dark shape moving through the storm. At first, I thought it was another drifter, someone searching for shelter, but the figure's pace was too steady, too deliberate. The man was tall, dressed in a black suit that seemed absurd against the rain, and mud, holding an umbrella that shielded him only partially from the downpour. A driver in uniform trailed behind, carrying a flashlight that cut through the darkness. The man's polished shoes splashed in puddles as he moved closer, his eyes scanning the shadows until they landed on me. My breath caught in my throat. Every muscle screamed for me to hide, but I was too weak, too tired, and too small to move. He stopped, just a few feet away, lowered his umbrella and crouched so that his eyes met mine. His hair was silver plastered to his forehead by the rain, and his face bore lines of age, but also something I had not seen in years, kindness. For a long moment he simply looked at me, and then he spoke my name. Emma. The sound of it on his lips froze me in place. No one here knew my name. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice hoarse. "How do you know me?" He drew in a deep breath, and when he exhaled, his words struck like lightning. "I am your grandfather. My name is Robert Whitmore." My mind reeled. My mother had told me he was dead, that he had passed away long before I was born. I shook my head. "That's not possible. My mom said you were gone." His lips curved into a sad smile. "That's what she wanted you to believe. She cut me out of her life years ago after a fight about money, and she told you lies to keep me away. But I never stopped searching for you." His voice cracked with grief but steadied with determination. "When I heard what had happened, that your stepfather had thrown you out, I knew I could not waste another day." I pulled my backpack tighter, suspicion boiling with fear. "If you are really my grandfather, then why now? Why, after all these years?" He did not flinch. Instead, he leaned closer so the rain dripping from his umbrella landed on his shoulders, not on me. "Because your father, my son-in-law, betrayed me long ago. He stole money, spread lies, and your mother chose his side. I lost her, but I never wanted to lose you. I cannot undo the past, Emma, but I can promise you this: you will not spend another night like this." His words struck against the walls I had built inside me. I searched his face for deception, for any hint of manipulation, but what I saw were eyes so much like my mother's used to be before she dimmed under Tom's shadow. Eyes filled with regret and hope. Lightning cracked above us, and the tarp I had pulled over my shoulders ripped loose in the wind. My backpack grew heavier as water seeped through, and my sketchbook cried ink onto its pages. I looked down at the soaked paper and then back at the man crouched before me. Something inside me broke. If he was lying, I would face that pain later. But if he was telling the truth, this was the only chance I had left. My voice shook, but I forced the words out. "If you are lying, I will never forgive you. Not for my sake, but for mine." His gaze softened and he nodded solemnly. "You have my word, Emma. You will never regret this." He stood, extended his hand, and held the umbrella over us both. With trembling legs, I rose, clutching my backpack, and followed him out of the darkness. At the curb, a sleek black car waited with its headlights cutting through the storm, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I dared to believe in rescue. The ride to Robert Whitmore's estate felt like something out of a dream. The hum of the car's heater wrapping me in warmth I had not felt in years. I clutched my backpack to my chest, terrified that if I let go, it would all vanish, that I would wake up back under the bridge with rain dripping on my face. The driver's eyes flicked toward me in the mirror kind, but curious, while Robert sat beside me silent, giving me space. When we pulled through iron gates onto a long driveway lined with palm trees swaying in the storm, my breath caught. The house that rose before us looked like something from the magazines I used to flip through at the library: cream walls, tall windows glowing with soft light, and a fountain that sparkled despite the rain. I stepped inside, and the smell of polished wood and fresh flowers hit me. A chandelier hung above, scattering golden light across marble floors. 2 staff members appeared, a woman named Elena and a man named Luis. They greeted me with warmth I did not know how to accept. My legs shook as Robert led me upstairs to a room bigger than the entire floor of the house I had shared with Mom and Tom. The bed was made with crisp white sheets. A small crib had been placed by the window, even though there was no baby, and beside it a dresser already filled with art supplies, pencils, paints, sketch pads untouched by rain. My eyes stung. "This is for you," Robert said softly. "You deserve a space that is safe." That night, I slept under a heavy blanket that smelled faintly of lavender, my sketchbook drying on the nightstand beside me. For the first time in years, I did not wake to footsteps pounding the hall or Tom's voice barking orders. Instead, I woke to the sound of birds and sunlight spilling through tall curtains. The next morning, Robert introduced me to Dr. Ramirez, a physician who examined me carefully. He asked questions gently, never pushing too hard. He noted the fading bruises, the old scars, the malnourishment. By law, he was required to file a report, and I saw him make the call to CPS right there in the living room. My stomach tightened with fear, but Robert placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "This time, it will not be swept under the rug," he promised. "This time, you have me, and we will make sure they listen." True to his word, within days, a CPS worker returned, but everything felt different. There was medical evidence, there were drawings that captured years of silent abuse, and there was Robert calm, commanding a man who would not be dismissed. For once, I was not alone. Slowly, my fear began to thaw. In the afternoons, Elena helped me wash my clothes and showed me how to bake bread in the huge kitchen. Luis cooked meals that made my stomach ache with gratitude. Warm soup and soft bread that filled me in a way crackers under a bridge never could. At night, I sat on the balcony with Robert while he sipped coffee and asked me about my life. He listened without judgment as I told him about Tom's fists, about Mom's silence, about the nights I whispered to my sketchbook because no one else would hear me. His eyes glistened, but he never interrupted. "You have suffered more than you should have," he said one evening, "but you are still here. That means you are stronger than you know." He encouraged me to draw again, not just shadows, but anything I felt. At first, my hands shook, but soon the lines began to flow. I drew the palm trees outside the fountain in the garden, even the chandelier with its dozens of tiny lights. Each drawing was like a step back to myself, yet the fear did not vanish overnight. Sometimes when the floor creaked, I jolted, expecting Tom to burst in. Sometimes I heard Mom's voice in my dreams, whispering that I should just endure. Robert never told me to forget. Instead, he reminded me that healing was not about erasing the past, but building a life that proved I was more than it. When CPS scheduled a follow-up, Robert insisted on being present. This time, with the evidence in hand, the worker spoke with seriousness I had never seen before. There would be investigations, hearings, legal protections. For the first time, I believed that justice might not only exist in stories. As days passed, I began to smile again. Small, fragile smiles at first, then real ones when Anna visited and gasped at my new room. "This is like a palace," she whispered, hugging me tightly. I felt guilty that she had been the only one who tried to help when the system looked away, but she only shook her head. "I am just glad you are safe." For the first time in a long while, I believed her. Returning to school after weeks of chaos felt like stepping into another life, one where I could breathe without bracing for impact, yet where whispers still followed me down the halls. Anna stayed close, shielding me from curious stares, reminding me that rumors mattered less than the truth. My counselor, Ms. Diaz, welcomed me back with open arms and tears in her eyes when she learned I was finally safe. She told me the administration had been briefed by CPS that steps would be taken to ensure Tom could not come near the campus, and for once, I felt the weight of protection instead of neglect. Slowly, I settled into a routine that did not revolve around fear. Each morning, I woke in my new room, sunlight pouring through wide windows, my art supplies neatly stacked on the desk Robert had bought me. I drew before school, sometimes just the swaying of palm trees, sometimes fragments of memory I needed to put on paper so they would stop circling my mind. At school, one of those sketches caught the attention of my art teacher, Mrs. Kent. It was a haunting piece I titled Under the Bridge, showing a girl huddled under dripping concrete while headlights streaked above. Mrs. Kent entered it into the upcoming student exhibition without asking, and when I walked into the gallery weeks later and saw it framed on the wall, my breath caught. Students, parents, and even strangers stood staring, their faces shifting from shock to sadness to admiration. For the first time, my pain had a voice louder than Tom's fists. Robert attended the exhibition too, standing quietly in the back until people began asking him about the artist. When he introduced himself as my grandfather, I saw pride in his eyes that warmed me more than any chandelier ever could. That night, he sat me down and explained he wanted to create a small trust fund in my name, not to spoil me, but to teach me how to manage money so I would never be trapped like my mother had been. He showed me bank statements and talked me through budgets, insisting that independence began with understanding how to protect what you earned. I soaked in every word, determined never to surrender control again. Outside of school, I joined a support group for teenage survivors of abuse at a local church. The circle of folding chairs and quiet voices became a place where I could say things out loud without shame. I listened to stories that mirrored mine, stories of stepfathers, mothers, uncles, neighbors, all the faces of betrayal children were forced to carry. For once, I did not feel alone. I began sharing my drawings with the group, and one evening, another girl hugged me after seeing her own story reflected on the page. Healing felt less like a solitary climb and more like a path walked together. Through all of this, Robert stayed close, but never overbearing. He drove me to meetings, asked about my classes, and celebrated small victories like passing a math quiz or trying out for the art club. He reminded me constantly that my worth did not depend on perfection, that surviving had already proven my strength. And yet, he also pushed me gently toward ambition, insisting that I had the power to define my future. "Do not let their voices be the last ones you hear," he told me one evening on the balcony. "Make sure yours is louder." His faith in me became the scaffolding on which I rebuilt myself. By spring, opportunities I never imagined began opening. Local newspapers wrote about the student exhibition, highlighting my piece, Under the Bridge. The article described me as a resilient young artist turning trauma into expression, and suddenly, teachers who had barely noticed me were asking about my plans. A nonprofit reached out offering a scholarship for summer art classes. I said yes, terrified, but exhilarated. Every brushstroke in those classes felt like reclaiming something that had been stolen, every sketch another piece of armor forged from survival. At the same time, I kept grounding myself in small, ordinary victories, cooking with Elena, learning new recipes from Luis, walking with Anna after school, studying with peers who no longer saw me as the silent girl hiding bruises, but as someone worth knowing. It was not that the past disappeared. It was that for the first time, it did not define every corner of my life. There were nights when fear crept back, when I jolted awake, certain I heard Tom's boots in the hallway, but each time Robert's steady voice reminded me I was safe. Each time the trust fund statement reminded me I had security. Each time my drawings reminded me I had a future. I was not just surviving anymore. I was beginning to thrive. It was late summer when the past came pounding back into my life, not with fists this time, but with polished shoes on marble floors. I was in my room sketching when Elena knocked gently and said a man and woman were at the front gate insisting they were my parents. My chest tightened. Mom and Tom. For months they had been silent, and I had prayed they would stay that way, but money has a way of dragging people back. Robert told Elena to let them in. "We will handle this properly," he said, his voice calm, but edged with steel. I followed him downstairs, my hands shaking, and there they were, standing in the grand foyer that felt so far removed from the house I had been cast out of. Mom wore a faded coat, her hair pulled back too tightly, her eyes darting around at the chandeliers and paintings. Tom stood beside her, his jaw set, his eyes cold, though I caught the flicker of greed in the way he scanned the room. "Emma," Mom said quickly, her voice syrupy sweet. "We have missed you so much. We thought maybe we could all reconnect. Family should stick together, right?" The word family scraped like broken glass. Tom added, "We made mistakes, but you belong with us. This man cannot replace your real parents." I opened my mouth, but Robert raised a hand and said, "We will not do this in shadows." He had already called CPS and the police, and within minutes officials arrived along with our attorney. The room filled with people, no longer just family drama, but a stage where truth would finally be heard. The CPS worker laid out the file on the coffee table, medical reports from Dr. Ramirez documenting my injuries, my drawings showing years of silent abuse, Statements from Ms. Diaz, the counselor, testimony from Mr. Miller, the neighbor who had heard the shouting and seen me bruised. It was all there, a story written in evidence they could not twist into lies. Mom's face paled. "This is exaggerated," she stammered. "She fell. She tripped. You know how clumsy she is." But the CPS worker cut her off. "We have corroborating accounts and consistent evidence. These are not accidents." Tom tried to step forward, puffing his chest. "She is my responsibility. I have the right to discipline my household." The police officer present fixed him with a cold stare. "Discipline does not leave scars, Mir Carter. Discipline does not involve throwing a minor out into the street during a storm." My heart pounded as all eyes turned toward me. This was the moment I had feared and prayed for in equal measure. My voice trembled, but I forced the words out. "The day you threw me out, I stopped being your daughter. The day you chose silence, Mom, I stopped having parents. I begged you to see me, to protect me, but you erased me instead. I will not let you erase me again." The silence that followed was heavy, every person in the room holding their breath. Then Robert stepped closer, his presence filling the space. He looked directly at Tom. "You stole my granddaughter's safety. You silenced my daughter until she became a shadow. And now you dare stand here demanding reunification when all you have ever given is pain. Enough!" The police officer moved forward and placed Tom in handcuffs. The clink of metal was louder than any slap I had ever endured. Tom sputtered, trying to protest, but his words drowned under the weight of justice. Mom burst into tears, her hands trembling as she reached toward me. "Emma, please, I am still your mother. I can change. I will change." I looked at her, my eyes burning but dry. "You had years to change. When I needed you most, you chose him. And now you live with that choice." She collapsed into a chair sobbing, but no one rushed to comfort her. The CPS worker explained clearly that Mom would lose custody rights, that guardianship would be transferred to Robert, that restraining orders would ensure Tom could not come near me again. Each word was a nail sealing the coffin of the life I had been forced to survive. For the first time, the system worked for me instead of against me. As Tom was led out of the house in handcuffs, neighbors who had gathered outside to watch whispered among themselves. Mr. Miller stood on the sidewalk, his arms crossed, his face grim but satisfied. Justice had not come easily, but it had come publicly, and that mattered. It was not just about me. It was about every child who had been told to stay silent, every bruise dismissed as clumsiness. I stood taller than I had ever felt before. Robert placed a steady hand on my shoulder and said quietly but firmly, "You have spoken the truth in the open, and that is courage no one can take from you." In that moment, I knew the chains had broken. The past was still mine, but it no longer owned me. In the weeks that followed the confrontation, the world around me shifted in ways I had never thought possible. Court hearings confirmed what CPS and the police had already set in motion. Tom was charged with child abuse, and a restraining order barred him from coming within 100 yards of me. My mother, Linda, lost her guardianship rights, the judge citing not only her failure to protect me, but also her active role in covering Tom's violence. The gavel struck, and with it a part of my old life closed forever. Guardianship was officially transferred to Robert, and for the first time, I felt what it meant to belong to someone who wanted me not out of obligation, but out of love. Life under Robert's roof did not erase the scars, but it gave me room to breathe, to grow, to heal. Elena taught me how to sew small tears in my clothes, her hands patient as she guided the needle with mine. Luis encouraged me to experiment in the kitchen, laughing when flour dusted my nose, telling me mistakes were part of the recipe. At school, I no longer shrank into corners. Mrs. Kent introduced me to a local artist who ran workshops for teens, and soon my weekends were spent surrounded by canvases, colors, and voices that celebrated expression instead of punishing it. The drawing Under the Bridge was sold at a charity auction to raise funds for child abuse survivors, and when the auctioneer announced the winning bid, I nearly cried from disbelief. The money went to programs that gave kids like me safe places to go, and Robert matched the donation with a quiet smile, whispering, "No child should ever feel forgotten." Slowly, people began asking me to share my story. At first, I resisted the memories still raw, but Robert reminded me that telling the truth was another form of survival. So I spoke at a small gathering at school, my voice shaking but steady enough to say the words, "Family is not always blood. Family is love protection and the people who stay when the world turns away." The applause was gentle, not the loud kind meant to fill silence, but the soft kind that meant people were truly listening. Healing did not come as a sudden sunrise, but as a series of dawns, each day a little brighter than the one before. Nights still brought shadows that whispered of fists and slammed doors, but when I woke, trembling, Robert's voice would remind me I was safe, that the locks on the doors now kept harm out instead of in. I learned to measure progress not in leaps, but in steps, finishing homework without anxiety, laughing with Anna until my stomach hurt, buying art supplies with money Robert helped me earn instead of hiding every dollar like contraband. By the time spring returned, the trust fund Robert had started became more than numbers in a bank account. It became proof that my future was mine to shape. He showed me how to save, how to plan for college, how to imagine myself as more than a survivor. We would sit together at his desk, his glasses perched on his nose, my sketchbook open beside the spreadsheets, and he would say, "Art and numbers both tell stories, Emma. You just have to learn to read them." On warm evenings, we sat on the balcony overlooking Tampa's skyline, the city lights twinkling like stars I could finally reach. Anna often joined us, and sometimes we planned dreams as if they were certain college careers trips we might take. In those moments, laughter felt like a song I had almost forgotten, but finally remembered the words to. Years later, I stood on a stage at a charity gala organized by Whitmore Properties, with Robert by my side and Anna in the front row cheering. My artwork was projected on a screen behind me, each piece a testament to survival and transformation. I looked out at the crowd, my voice steady as I said, I once thought my life ended the night I was thrown out into the rain. But it did not end. It began. Because when the people who should have protected me chose silence, others chose to stand. And that is what family truly means. The applause rose echoing through the hall, but all I saw was Robert's proud smile and Anna's tearful nod. After the gala, as the night air wrapped around us and the fountain outside glittered under the moon, Robert placed his arm gently around my shoulders. "You have given me back hope, Emma," he said, his eyes misty. Hope that healing is possible, even across generations. I leaned against him, the weight of years of pain lifting little by little. I thought about the bridge, about the rain, about the girl who whispered to her sketchbook in the dark. She was still part of me, but she no longer defined me. As we stood there, I knew with absolute certainty that no matter what storms lay ahead, I would never face them alone again.